Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a collection of on-the-road and gas station stories for you to enjoy. So get comfortable. Don't forget to check out Patreon, where we're having Free Week. I have just launched a video over there from some ghost town stories that are fantastic. You can listen to it for free right after this video if you want, link in the description too. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I have just finished university in the UK, and because I couldn't afford the expense of student accommodation, I made the decision to commute from my parents' house in East Sussex to the University of Canterbury. In all, it was about a 2-hour drive each way. For the most part, it was an enjoyable experience. My beloved car, a 2003 Rover 75, was more than suited to the long, winding journey that made its way through rural Kent. There are no motorways in that part of Kent, so the journey takes you through the beautiful hills and marshes in the heart of the county. Halfway through the journey was the village of Pluckley, which some might be aware as the most haunted village in England. It's a picturesque little place in a remote part of the Kentish hills, but when night falls, the countryside of Pluckley takes on a different form. To supplement my student income in the best way I could imagine, I had joined the Army Reserve in my uni town. This meant working in the evenings until 10. This meant I had to drive the next 2 hours to my parents' house from 10 till midnight. The driving at this time was extremely unsettling. There were no other drivers on the road for the most part, and also no streetlights and no phone service, and no towns save from Pluckley for about 20 miles. The woods seemed to take a different form. The ancient trees of the Daring Woods took gnarled, almost warped forms as far as the eye could see in every direction. In those woods, the darkness seemed to reflect my car's headlights back at me. The open country was worse. The sheer emptiness and loneliness of the area was laid bare to me. Ploughed agricultural fields with nothing in them, save for a crop of incredibly ominous scarecrows staring at the road in the middle of the field. Trees struck by lightning cast an unsettling shape in the darkness. It was enough to make anyone grip the wheel a little tighter and accelerate a little faster. On this particular night, I was coming back from a grueling private training session at my unit and was eager to get back. I had just driven through Pluckley village on a warm summer night. It was around 11 p.m, still and dead quiet, when I came to a crossroads, infamous in the area for being the cause of many fatal accidents through the years. So I shook my head out of the slight daze you get to when it's just you, the hum of the engine, the headlights, and the warm red glow of a Rover 75 instrument panel. As I drew to a stop at the junction, I could distinctly make out 3 white glowing orbs just off the roadway under a tree. They were in a formation, one at the top, one below it slightly to the right, the bottom one directly below the top one. I blinked again. The orbs had been replaced by the shape of a woman. She was translucent, dressed in white with long brown hair. The orbs seemed to have become her head, outstretched arms and a dress. She was there for a split second before I blinked again and she was gone. No orbs, no lady, no anything, just a tree and a stop sign. I said a small prayer under my breath, not knowing what else to do, and ploughed on in silence, with no radio, no humming or anything. The next morning, I woke up not knowing what to make of last night's sighting. I did some searching online, and discovered that particular road suffers from many hauntings. One in particular stood out to me. Back in the medieval period, an aristocratic lady had a love affair with a monk. Tragically, they were found out, and both took their lives rather than suffer the consequences. The lady's troubled spirit is said to walk the Pluckley countryside. Maybe it could have been her. Maybe some other poor souls doomed to restlessness at the crossroads. Most likely it was just my tiredness messing with my mind, but perhaps not. The fact that it was on a crossroads, and the historical significance of crossroads in England being the location where criminals and victims of suicide were buried as a way for the dead to never find peace, will always leave a shred of doubt in my mind. My grandmother only told me this story a handful of times, always when she wanted to scare the hell out of me, but it wasn't a ghost story. It was something real. You see, back in the late 1970s, when she was around 30, she flew to a sprawling East Coast city for a business meeting. One of those places like New York, all blinking like endless concrete in yellow taxis, like insects crawling the streets. She'd left her 5 kids behind for the trip, the youngest still in diapers, and this was a rare moment in her life where she wasn't changing sheets, boiling formula, or working her hands raw. The trip was supposed to be about work, but also just maybe reclaiming a bit of her own identity. She stayed at a modest hotel on the edge of downtown. That morning, she had a meeting across town. She had the front desk call a taxi while she stood outside under the awning, adjusting the strap of her leather bag and watching the traffic blur and go by. A cab pulled up. It looked like all the others, beige body, dented bumper, and the classic taxi sign on top of the car. She didn't see the driver's face, but he leaned over and popped the passenger door open, and that was enough for her. Assuming it was the taxi the hotel called, she stepped in. The smell was the first thing that hit her, sour and damp, like mildew and body odor soaked into the vinyl seats. There was a plastic Jesus stuck to the dashboard, arms outstretched like he was bracing for impact. She gave the man the address, but he didn't reply, just nodded slightly. At first, she didn't think much of his silence. Some drivers were like that. She tried to make small talk, asked how traffic was and whether he'd been a driver long, but she received no reply, not even a grunt. He kept both hands on the wheel and stared ahead through the cracked windshield. It was 10 minutes in when she realized something was wrong. They weren't going in the right direction. The city's towers were vanishing behind them, and the streets thinned. Sidewalks gave way to chain-link fences and gas stations with flickering signs. Soon they were on an unfamiliar road lined with shuttered motels and boarded-up storefronts. She leaned forward. "Hey, I think you missed a turn." But he didn't reply. "Excuse me, did you hear me? Where are we going?" He didn't as much as glance in the mirror. She reached for the door handle casually, trying not to show panic. It wasn't locked. That's when she knew. She started watching the roadside, seeing signs for a no-name highway and an old motel up ahead. The place looked like something from a nightmare. There was a single red light flickering above the office door. A couple of windows had bars. She thought about the 5 kids waiting for her at home. She thought about how long it would take someone to notice if she was missing, and she looked at his hands, big and still white-knuckled on the wheel. And she looked at the road again. She made a choice. In one smooth motion, she curled her legs beneath her like a spring, flung open the door and jumped. The asphalt tore through her stockings and shredded the heels of her shoe. She rolled once, twice, until her shoulder hit a patch of gravel. Her head rang with the sound of rubber skidding as the cab screeched to a stop. But she didn't wait to see if he got out. She ran into the dark brush off the road. Twigs sliced her palms, and branches scratched her face as she scrambled into the trees. Panting so hard she tasted copper in her mouth. She crouched behind a rotting log and waited. She could see the cab's headlights sweeping across the road like a searchlight. And that's when she saw him. The driver silhouetted in the glare, standing outside of the cab. He turned slowly, scanning the trees. She saw him raise something to his face that looked like a cigarette. He exhaled a long plume of smoke and got back in the cab. But he didn't leave, not right away. He just sat there, engine idling, headlights cutting through the trees. She stayed frozen in that bush until the car finally turned around and rolled off, the red taillights disappearing into the distance. It took her nearly an hour to walk to the next hotel, her knees bleeding, her blouse ripped, and when she reached the lobby, the receptionist looked at her like she was a vagrant. "I need to use your phone," she said, voice shaking. "I'm sorry, ma'am, we can't." She slammed her hand on the counter. "Get me the phone." She blinked and handed it over. She called the colleague she was supposed to meet, gave them the address, and told them to bring the police and hurry. By the time they arrived, she'd composed herself, but her eyes were still wild. She told the cops everything: the wrong cab, the man, the route, the motel. The police raided the place that night. They found padlocks on the inside of doors, soundproof rooms, rope, mattresses on the floor, and 2 women who'd been reported missing, who had been drugged, battered, and were barely conscious. There were traces of others. Not enough to charge him with murder, but enough to know this wasn't a one-time operation. The man was never caught. It turned out there was no official record of a cab licensed under that vehicle's number. Fake plates. A ghost cab, trawling hotels near the edge of the city for someone just like her. The next day, her colleague asked if she wanted to end the trip early and head back home, but she said no. That getting kidnapped doesn't mean her work was done, and they stayed. To this day, when she tells the story, she always ends it in the same way. That guy didn't count on her mother of 5 being the most dangerous person in the car. This happened when I was around 17, trying to make my way out of Edmonton late one night. My phone battery had depleted, and I got completely turned around. I finally found the edge of town at around 2 a.m. and decided to stop at a random gas station to fill up before heading home. Now for context, I was young, dumb, and naive in the way only someone who thinks they're street smart without ever having been on the street can be. As I'm finishing up at the pump, this guy approaches me. He's maybe late 30s or early 40s, looking average, nothing too sketchy on the surface. And he gives me this sob story about how he just needs $30 for gas so he can get home. He says his wallet got stolen or something, I can't quite remember the full story, but he's desperate and says his kids are waiting for him with the classic "I swear I'll pay you back" vibe. Against my better judgment, I gave him the money. I mean, I felt bad, and $30 for me was quite a significant amount of money, but I figured maybe I'd get good karma. He thanked me way too much, like over the top grateful, and then says, "Hey, let me get your address so I can mail it back to you. Come to my place real quick, it's just a few blocks away." Red flags much? Yeah, in hindsight they were practically throwing a parade, but at the time I was tired, disoriented, and apparently operating with one brain cell, so I follow him to his house. It's on a dark, dead-end street in a part of town I'd never normally go near, but we pull up, and the place is just off. No lights on, no cars nearby, and it looks abandoned, but sort of lived in, if that makes sense. I park and follow him up to the door. He opens it and walks in, but doesn't turn on any lights, but gestures towards the interior and says something like, "Come in, you can write your address down." I step into the boot room, the little entryway kiosk thing where you kick your shoes off, and everything in me starts screaming. The air felt wrong. I stood there frozen while he disappeared deeper into the house. He still didn't turn a single light on, and I was completely silent. And he keeps calling me from out in the dark, telling me to come further in. And then I said, "You know, actually, I'll just give it to you here." Scribbled down a totally fake address from memory and backed the hell out. I just got into my car, locked the door, and drove off like my life depended on it. And perhaps it did. But here's the kicker. A few years later, I find out there had been an active serial killer operating in the exact area at the exact same time. To this day, I don't know if it was him, but the man's energy, the house, the way he didn't want me to leave, the way he tried to lure me deeper inside, I'll always wonder. And I always will thank whatever instinct finally kicked in before it was too late. God, I was so stupid back then. But at least I lived to tell the tale. This story comes from one of my old teachers, a no-nonsense kind of guy that didn't exaggerate. He told us this during a random conversation in class once, and the room went completely silent by the time he was finished. He told us the story of when he was 18, he was driving a long stretch of rural highway late at night. It was the kind of road where you could go for miles without seeing another soul. As he went around the bend, he spotted a man on the shoulder, thumb out. He looked pretty normal, mid-30s, jeans jacket, and carrying a beat-up guitar case. My teacher said he wasn't usually the kind to pick up strangers, but something about the guy seemed, well, not threatening. He pulled over. The man got in without a word, no thanks, no name, no conversation, and sat there with the guitar case wedged between his legs, eyes forward, totally still. My teacher tried to break the silence a few times with small talk. "You heading far? Cold night, huh?" But the guy never replied. He described those 20 minutes as some of the most uncomfortable in his life. Eventually, he sees a gas station up ahead and told the guy he was getting close to his own turn-off and he'd be happy to drop him there. The man didn't even nod, just opened the door and got out, still holding the guitar case. My teacher didn't think much of it at the time, just a weird, awkward encounter. But the next day, this story broke on the news. The gas station had been hit in a brutal armed robbery not long after he'd left it. The cashier had been shot point blank with a shotgun. The suspect, described by witnesses as a man carrying a guitar case. He never picked up a hitchhiker again. This happened a few years ago, and I still can't believe how surreal and brutal it was. My family had just finished a small emotional memorial for my aunt. We'd driven out to her favorite spot to spread her ashes, and afterwards we were all a little drained and sad, but grateful to be together. On our way home, we stopped at a gas station in a small town to stretch, grab a few drinks and use the bathrooms. That's where everything went sideways. Out of nowhere, a group of about 6 teenagers approached my brother and cousin as they were standing near the pumps, and with no warning they attacked. One of them sucker punched my cousin from behind, another tried to trip my brother and shoved him hard into the car. They were laughing, yelling and shoving like it was a game. At first, my family tried to defuse things, no one wanted to escalate, but we'd just been to a funeral and the teens were relentless. Every time someone backed off or tried to leave, they'd lunge again. It wasn't a dumb prank, they were out for blood. And it didn't stop with my older brother and cousins, they turned on everyone. My disabled mother, who walks with assistance, got shoved hard enough to stumble into a curb. My grandfather and grandmother were pushed, who were literally rolling around in an oxygen tank, was grabbed and screamed at. One of them even started hitting the windows of a car where my 2 toddler nephews were strapped in, and they were screaming. We were just a family in mourning, standing in a gas station parking lot and getting ambushed for no reason. We finally managed to pile everyone into the cars and get the hell out of there, drove to the safer area and called the police, gave them descriptions, vehicles and everything. But they did nothing. They didn't send anyone to the scene, didn't follow up or take any statements in person, just logged the call and told us that we could file a report if we wanted. There was no justice. We were left sitting there trying to console crying kids, calm our grandmother's breathing, and figure out how to make sense of what just happened. We had just laid a loved one to rest, and then strangers tried to destroy what little peace we had left. I'll never forget how angry, helpless, and violated we all felt. I still don't understand it. There was no fight, no provocation, just random cruelty for the sake of it. I was small at the time, but still remember this like it had only just happened. My mum had pulled into the gas station and parked. She went inside to pay while I stayed in the car. I was just chilling in the passenger seat when out of nowhere, this dude runs up behind our car looking frantic, running for his life nearly. He stops for a moment to look behind him, then sprints over to the payphone and starts frantically dialing. Suddenly another car pulls up right next to ours. Another dude jumps out, runs straight to the payphone and grabs the guy by the head, slams his face into the phone repeatedly over and over. The guy who was running frantically breaks free and takes off running down the next block. The other guy jumps back into his car and speeds off right behind him. I had no idea what I had just witnessed. I was too young to understand what it was about, but I definitely remember the adrenaline rush just watching it happen through the car window. When I was older, I tried looking it up to see if I can find any news reports or see what it was about, but I never did. It remains a mystery. I have IBS, and when I gotta go, I've got to go. There's no mercy, just an explosion. So one time I was at this street festival, and of course, the line for the bathroom was insane. I tried going into a few nearby shops, but every single one had the same sign. Restrooms are for customers only. I didn't have time to buy a coffee and browse candles, and I was on the verge of explosive diarrhea. We rushed back to the car and drove to the closest gas station. I ran inside, barely keeping myself upright, and asked where the restroom was. The cashier handed me a key attached to some massive object, and as I was running out to the door, they called after me, "But you probably don't want to go in there." Too late. I had no choice. I've been in some bad bathrooms before. Truck stops, porta potties in the sun, you name it. But this was another level. It looked like something out of a horror movie. A blinking bare bulb swung above like a warning siren. The toilet was black with mold. And there was no toilet paper, which, let me remind you, is critical when you're dealing with explosive diarrhea. I could see bugs crawling around. Dirty avocado green tiles cracked and caked in filth. Black grout lines like someone had smeared charcoal into the crevices themselves. The light switch was hanging loose with exposed wires, and I braced myself, expecting a serial killer to kick the door in mid-poo. Meanwhile, my husband had gone inside to grab a drink, and when he told the cashier I was using the restroom, they just said, "Oh yeah, she really shouldn't have gone in there." Gee, thanks for the heads up. What kind of place keeps a cursed restroom like this operational, especially in Franklin, Tennessee, which is supposed to be a fancy high-income town? Obviously, I haven't been back since. Screw those shops for denying a desperate woman with IBS, and the gas station for offering a bathroom that felt like a side quest from Silent Hill. I had to drive an hour and a half home after, feeling repulsive, like I'd been marked by the underworld. My husband felt so bad for me. I was getting breakfast with a co-worker at McDonald's. Funnily enough, we were bunking off work at the time, so we were just parked in the front of the parking lot, eating our breakfast sandwiches. We live in an area known for snowy winters, and one of the McDonald's employees was outside snow-blowing the parking lot. My co-worker and I were just minding our business, when all of a sudden I noticed something at the gas station next to us. The two lots are separated by about a 2-foot wall of snow. An old lady must have accidentally floored it instead of hitting the brakes while pulling into the gas station. Her car flew into the snowbank, sending snow and ice everywhere. It launched up like it hit a ramp, and then perfectly landed on the snowblower, sending the man operating it flying back. He hit his head on the pavement, and thankfully it was cold enough that he was wearing a thick winter hat and wasn't badly injured. The aftermath was surreal. The car was perched so that the front wheels were still spinning in the air, held up by the snowblower, while the back wheels were buried in the snowbank. My mouth was just hanging open, food falling on the floor from my burger. A few of us ran over to check on the guy and call the ambulance. What a wild morning. And we couldn't even talk about it back at the office because someone would have asked what we were doing at McDonald's during work hours. My friend and I still talk about how insane it was to witness. I was 20, studying abroad in Japan, and took a weekend road trip with some friends to see Mount Fuji in the spring. It was supposed to be a peaceful and scenic drive, except no one told us that spring in Mount Fuji could still mean blizzard conditions. We were in a rented vehicle and not prepared. The higher up we got, the worse the roads became. Slick, winding, steep hills with next to no traction. Locals were flying past us with chains on their tires, while we were sliding around like Bambi on ice. Eventually, we pulled over near a turnout where a few guys were offering chain installation for cash. They had little roadside setups, jackets on, kneeling in the snow, clearly working this as a side hustle for stranded tourists like us. We figured it was a no-brainer, pay them, get chains, and get home still alive. So we agreed. While they were working, one guy in his mid-40s with a rough vibe and chain smoking while on his knees in the snow looked up at me and said something in broken English I didn't quite understand. "No cash, we keep her." He laughed like it was a joke. His buddy chuckled too, but I wasn't laughing, and neither were my friends. I froze for a moment, not sure if I understood him. "What did you say?" He smiled wider and eager, as if to say, "You heard me the first time." I stepped back, suddenly hyper-aware that we were stranded on a mountain road in the middle of a snowstorm with no cell phone reception and no clue where the nearest town was. And two strange men now had control of whether or not we'd be able to get back safely. Thankfully, one of my friends had enough cash on him to pay the full amount. No haggling. He just handed it over while keeping his eyes on them the whole time. They finished installing the chains and stood up without another word, and waved us off. We didn't even stop to double-check the tires, just got in and started driving silently, shaken, but very much ready to be back in Tokyo. Looking back, I don't know if it was an actual threat, a gross joke, or some twisted power play meant to make a bunch of foreign kids uncomfortable, but I'll never forget the way he said it, or the way it didn't sound like he was joking. This happened a few years ago, and I still don't know how I didn't end up face down on the pavement. So there's this gas station on the edge of town, the last one before the interstate. It always got solid diesel prices, so truckers love it, and I'd stop there almost every day after work to fuel up and grab a Gatorade or something. It was just another normal afternoon. I'd filled up my pickup, parked at the front, and walked in for a drink. As I was leaving the store bottle in hand and walking towards my truck, I heard the sounds of tires screeching. 3 vehicles came flying into the lot. A beat-up pickup, 2 minivans in totally different colors and models, all unmarked, and looked like regular civilian vehicles. But the second they stopped moving, hell broke loose. 6 men in full tactical gear burst out the minivans, DEA vests, AR-style rifles and ski masks. They moved fast, shouting commands, fanning out around an older sedan parked right next to my truck. 2 of the agents immediately stormed into the store. The other 4 surrounded the sedan and dragged out 3 people inside. No yelling from the suspects and no struggle. It was like they'd done this hundreds of times before. and within seconds, the 3 passengers were cuffed and stuffed into the back of the minivans, which then peeled off like nothing happened. Meanwhile, the 2 agents inside reappeared maybe 30 seconds later, with the guy who'd been in the line behind me at the register. He looked stunned, like he hadn't even processed it yet. They shoved him into the pickup and drove off without a word. The whole thing lasted maybe less than a minute. I'm standing there in the middle of it all, bottle of Gatorade in hand, feeling like I had just wandered onto the set of Breaking Bad, or like the guy in Lilo and Stitch with the ice cream cone, where the ice cream always falls off. My first dumb instinct? Film it for Snapchat because no one was ever going to believe me. But thankfully my brain caught up before my phone did. These guys were wearing masks before COVID was a thing, which definitely wasn't for health reasons. The no witness vibe was strong, so instead of filming, I quietly, painfully and slowly slid back into my truck like I was defusing a bomb. Didn't make eye contact, didn't breathe, and just prayed they wouldn't think I was with the other car. I drove off still shaking. The next day I came back and casually asked the clerk what the hell that was all about. He looked at me and said, "My boss told me not to talk about it." There were no news reports or press release, nothing online. It was like it never happened, and it remains one of the most surreal moments of my life. A few years ago, when I was 19, I was doing a 9-hour solo drive through the back roads in the deep south, somewhere between Dothan, Alabama, and Valdosta, Georgia. It was 2 a.m. I was exhausted, and my nerves were already shot from night driving, and I really needed to pee. I pull into the sketchiest truck stop I've ever seen in my life. Flickering lights, no other cars, not even music playing from the pumps, just dead quiet. Like the place that got condemned but never officially shut down. I get out and head into the women's restroom, and I'm immediately greeted by the sight of a woman finishing a fat line of a white substance on top of the children's hand dryer. We lock eyes. She's got this hollow stare and a smile that's way too slow to form. I say, "Excuse me?" and awkwardly squeeze past her into a stall, trying to pretend like I didn't just walk in on a felony. I hear her clench her throat. The sink runs for a second and then I hear the door creak open. I think she's left. Except, I glance down and see a pair of worn-out pink jelly sandals pointing right at my stall door. She never left. She pretended to walk out. She's just standing there silently facing the stall. I stay frozen. Seconds pass, then minutes. I keep checking and yep, she's still there, just those faded pink shoes and 2 motionless feet aimed directly at me like I'm being watched through the damn door. As I'm spiraling now, she knows I saw her doing something illegal. Is she waiting to confront me, to rob me, to threaten me? To make it worse, my phone is in the car, so I have no way to call for help. But then I get an idea. I fake a phone call. I say loud and casually, "Hold on, I'm coming. I thought I was going to be sick. Do you need me to grab you anything from the store? Are you good?" "Huh? Okay, oh yeah, I'll be right out." Then I flush again, wait a few seconds, and I think I hear her shuffle towards the exit. I wait a full extra minute, then I crouch down, and I see her feet are gone. I didn't wash my hands, I just burst out that stall, pushed through the door and sprinted to my car, and locked myself inside. I sat there shaking, staring at the bathroom doors, waiting to see if she'd come out after me, but she never did. I still don't know what the hell she wanted. Maybe she thought I'd rat her out. Maybe she was waiting to ask me something, or maybe something far more nefarious. All I know is I never stop at gas stations like that anymore, especially not at 2 a.m. I was a broke college student trying to stretch every dollar, and I figured I could save a few cents per gallon by filling up outside of town. I ended up in some nowhere town with a population of about 400 people, and I find this crusty-looking gas station that somehow had about 15 cents cheaper than anywhere else. Score. The shop's technically open, but the doors are locked, and the only way to communicate with the clerk is through one of those weird, thick plastic rotating drive-through things. The problem is there's no clerk in sight. I ring the bell and wait, nothing, then ring again, and there's no sign of life. I'm standing there starting to feel like the opening scene of a horror movie, when a random dude strolls up out of nowhere, hoodie, messed up shoes and twitching slightly. "Yo, could you grab me some cigarrillos?" And honestly, I get it. Man's trying to roll a spliff. It would cost me like $1.50 extra, and if I were ever stuck and needed someone to grab me papers, I'd want them to return the favor. So I'm like, yeah, sure, if the dude ever comes back. 5 minutes go by. Still no clerk, just me and this guy who's now standing uncomfortably close. And then he hits me with, "Wanna come with me to the ATM? It's just around the corner." No, hard pass. I half laughed and said, "Nah man, can't afford the out-of-network ATM fee." And that's when his vibe changes. His eyes go flat and voice drops. "Alright." And he just stands there staring at me. Now, I'm not about to find out what just around the corner means in this town, so I slowly back towards my car. Lucky for me, I had it rigged. If you unlock it with the key and not the fob, it sets off the thief alarm. So I intentionally trigger it. The alarm starts blaring and the guy backs off just enough for me to yank the door open and jump in. I lock it, start the engine, and peace the hell out before he gets any ideas. I drove for 2 more towns before I found another gas station, and when I checked Google later, there were 0 ATMs in that area. Guy wasn't taking me to an ATM. He was probably taking me around the side to throttle me and rob me. Or worse. A few years ago, my wife and I were on a road trip through New Mexico, heading toward Ruidoso from Las Cruces. It was a long, empty stretch of highway, miles of desert and barely any traffic, and sometime around dusk we pulled into a remote rest stop to stretch our legs and use the bathrooms. No one else was there, just the 2 of us. I told my wife I'd be a few minutes, I needed to take care of some business, and she headed into the women's restroom while I went to the men's. I took my time, got comfortable, not thinking much of it. By the time I flushed and came out, everything looked normal, but my wife looked pale and shaken. She pulled me aside and told me what happened. While I was in the restroom, a large man, someone she'd briefly seen earlier getting out of a semi parked along the side lot, came into the lobby. At first he acted like he was just stretching, looking around, no big deal. But then he started inching closer. Too close. He asked if she was alone, if she was from around here, if she was waiting for someone. His voice was calm, but the way he stared at her made her skin crawl. She said he had this empty look in his eyes, like he was running through possibilities in his head. When she didn't respond the way he wanted, he moved a step closer, then another. She backed up, trying to keep a table between them. He started asking more personal questions like, "Where's your car? You driving by yourself?" Then without warning, he stepped even closer, invading her personal space and leaning in to sniff her hair, slowly and deliberately right by her ear. She froze and he smiled. She was about to bolt for the door when he suddenly stopped talking, went silent, and tilted his head slightly like he heard something. That something was me flushing. He realized he wasn't alone. Without another word, he turned and calmly walked out of the lobby towards the women's restroom, like he was trying to play it off or maybe scout for another opportunity. That's when my wife ran straight towards me as I stepped out the men's, completely unaware. As she grabbed my arm, we looked back and saw the semi pulling out of the lot, merging back onto the highway without hesitation. He never looked back. We called the state police as soon as we got to Ruidoso, gave them a description, plate number, location, but who knows if anything came of it. The guide hadn't done anything criminal technically, but they'd said they'd keep an eye out. To this day, she refuses to go to any rest stop alone, and I don't blame her. Because here's the thing, We weren't being paranoid. He wasn't just being weird. The man was testing the waters, seeing what he could get away with. And if I had taken 5 minutes longer, I don't want to think how that could have ended. This happened towards the beginning of our freshman year in college. My best friend, another freshman girl my age, and I befriended this other freshman guy, and we quickly became a tight-knit group. We would hang out with each other constantly, to the point some assumed we were siblings or roommates. At the beginning of our first semester, none of us were really into the whole party scene, so we spent most of our time wandering around campus into the late hours of the night. I'm talking 4 to 5 a.m. We had lots of fun adventures and made all sorts of fun memories doing this, but we had our fair share of weird encounters as well, both with other people, and some that we can't explain to this day. This story happened not on the weekend, but I believe on a weekday close to midterms. I remember all of us studying in this one academic building together late at night, and then one of us mentioned wanting to take a long walk around campus to help relieve stress. It was around 2 or 3 a.m., and we decided to hike out to one of the scenic overlooks on our campus. Our campus was pretty rural and surrounded by woods, so there was a path through the woods that you could take, or you could just walk on the main road. We decided to follow the road. It was really dark, and this particular area of campus had very few streetlights. We were using our phone flashlights to see where we were going. It was probably not the best idea to be roaming around campus so late at night, but we were stupid freshmen and had done it plenty of times before. Our campus felt safer due to being so rural. We made it to the overlook, and we were the only ones out there due to how late it was. There weren't any cars parked or anything. The way it's set up is the road goes into this circle around the overlook. We were sitting on a bench with our backs to the main road, just talking about random things, when all of a sudden we felt headlights at our backs. We all turned to see who it was. It wasn't entirely unusual for a car to be there that late at night. Our campus police do regular patrols of the area, or students will go there to hook up or do things that perhaps aren't that advisable. The car was an older GMC Yukon-style SUV and was a dark forest green color. I vividly remember the color because you typically don't see that many cars of that color. We all watched as the car came into the road, drove around the little circle, and then went back up the road. We went back to our conversation. Maybe 2 to 3 minutes later, we could see headlights behind us again. We all turned to look and realized it was the same green car as before coming back a second time. We didn't think much of it, but I could tell my friends were slightly weirded out by it. Again, the car approached from the road behind us and went around the loop, but was driving much slower this time. They stopped midway through the circle for a few seconds before slowly driving away again. This isn't that unusual for cars to go slow around the circle portion, especially if they're tourists or someone wanting to enjoy the view of the lookout. So we didn't think too much of it, and figured they just came back for a second time to enjoy the sights, although it probably wasn't much given how dark it was. And we tried carrying on our conversation, but I think all of us were feeling a little uneasy. I almost wasn't surprised when 3 minutes later, we saw the headlights again. We all turned around, hoping it wouldn't be the same car, but of course it was. We reached pretty scared, but I think we were all trying to laugh it off. And we were all like, haha, they must really love it here. This time, they once again slowed way down, going around the circle, and rolled down their windows to yell at us. We were sitting far enough back from the circle, and it was a windy night, so we couldn't really make out what it was they were trying to say. But we all agreed they said something along the lines of, "gonna get you," towards the end. We also couldn't see well enough to recognize faces, but could see enough to know it was a car full of younger men. We are all pretty uneasy and confused at this point, but after they decide to drive off, we frantically are trying to figure out how to handle the situation. We were first trying to brush it off and calm each other down by saying it was probably some of our mutual friends trying to scare us, but none of us recognized the car or voices enough to say that was the case for sure. We all considered walking back since it was so late anyway, but we were frightened that we would run into the car again on the main road. My best friend and I tried to laugh it off, agreeing there was simply no way it could drive by a fourth time and that we were probably making a big deal out of nothing. My male friend, who kept telling us he didn't have a good feeling about it, said that if the car came back again he would try and take a picture of the license plate and call campus police. We eventually agreed with him, figuring the car likely wouldn't come by again. But after 5 minutes and no signal of the car, we all relaxed and continued carrying on. But of course we were wrong. We all sat in silence as the headlights approached for the fourth time. Neither of us really wanted to say anything or look behind us to confirm if it was the dark green car, as the car rounds the circle. That's when our male friend stands up with his phone in hand in an attempt to take a picture of the license plate. This time, instead of completing the circle and going back up the road, the car suddenly pulls into the parking spot off to the side. My friends and I are panicking, assuming the worst is about to happen. We're all waiting for someone to step out of the car, when our male friend suddenly gets up and is like, "This is ridiculous, I'm going to go talk to them." My other friend and I are begging him not to, since we don't know who these people are or what they're capable of, but he brushes us off and starts walking towards them. At this point, I think he was assuming it was likely a fellow friend or student trying to scare us and not some randos. My friend and I are freaking out as we watch him approach this car, and whoever is driving rolls down the window and sticks their head out. It was definitely not someone we knew. It was a guy, probably a few years older than us, who looked rough. Absolutely not the person you want to run into the woods at 3 a.m. My friend and I watched this guy and our friend begin to talk, and to us, it looked like the guy in the car was really angry. We were debating whether or not we should go ahead and call the police, but as soon as my friend managed to dig her phone out from her bag, our friend was walking back towards us and the green car was leaving. We all looked at him as he explained the car was filled with creepy-looking guys a little older than us. The driver had explained they were from out of town and had gotten bored, so they decided to drive around campus to mess with students when they came across us. One of the passengers had seen my friend get up to take what he correctly assumed was a photo of their license plate, so then they freaked out and decided to pull over and tell us they meant no harm since they didn't want any trouble. They apologized to my friend for scaring us and explained they would leave. My friend was so scared while talking to them that all he could really say was, maybe don't do that again because we almost called the cops. We all calmed down significantly after they left, and eventually felt safe enough to leave. From what I remember, I think we ended up getting lucky and were able to find another friend who happened to be awake that late, who came to drive us back so we wouldn't have to walk. We all laugh about this situation now, since ultimately nothing bad happened, but it still gives me the creeps. What would have happened if my friend hadn't tried to take that picture of their license plate? Were they planning something else that we prevented? Why was this group of random men who lived over an hour away randomly driving around a rural college campus on a random weeknight? It hit me a few days before all of this happened, but I realized I had seen that car before, earlier in the day when it all happened. I had spotted the exact same car a few times around campus. It drove past me as I was walking to my morning class, again when I was coming out of the library later in the afternoon, and again at the dining hall in the early evening. I made note of it the first time I saw it since it was such a uniquely colored car, and also happens to be one of my favorite colors. As I kept seeing it, I remember thinking, I've got a stalker. But I didn't take it seriously at the time since it's a smaller campus that has a lot of traffic that time of year. So I figured it was just a tourist and a coincidence that I kept seeing the car. But now I really wonder, were they following me the whole day? Had the car been around before this and I never noticed? I personally think that those people wanted to do something to me or to someone, and they were eyeing up to see who they could do what to whom. The story of them coming in from another city and driving around campus from morning until 3 a.m. just doesn't add up to me. I know that they had darkness in their hearts and they wanted to do something bad. I'm glad they didn't get away with it and chickened out when my friend spoke to them. This happened years ago, back in Missouri where I was born and raised. I was at a gas station with my cousin filling up diesel. My cousin wanted to go inside and grab something to eat, so I stayed outside waiting by the pump. When out of nowhere I heard the loudest bang I've ever heard in my life. At first I had no idea what it was. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I crept over to the gas station window and peered inside. What I saw still haunts me. There was a man lying on the floor covered in blood. It was everywhere. Later I found out the guy on the floor was trying to rob the store, and another guy who had a gun shot him in the back, taking his life instantly. I didn't stick around after that. My cousin who was inside saw everything, and even now, years later, he still talks about that moment like it was yesterday, because of how it impacted him. It's the kind of thing that shakes you to your core and reminds you how quickly life can be snuffed out. I have traveled all over by myself and had some weird moments on the road, but strangely enough, nothing ever happened at rest areas. It's the gas stations that gave me the creeps. So one night around 2 a.m. in South Dakota, I pulled off the freeway heading towards Minneapolis to grab a Coke. After pumping my gas, I got back into my car and that's where I noticed something. In the passenger seat of the car parked next to me, there was a man just sitting there. He looked at me, and then he started licking his lips, slow and deliberate, like he was savoring something. Then he raised his hand to his mouth and made this weird jerking motion. I don't know what he was doing, but I got a bad feeling, and I didn't want to wait around to find out. I hit the gas and got the hell out of there. Another time, I was leaving a trade show north of Philadelphia with my girlfriend. We decided to visit a friend near Princeton before heading back to our hotel. What we didn't know was there was a citywide gas delivery strike and every gas station was out of fuel. We were driving on the freeway starting to worry about running dry, so I pulled off and found a station, but the whole area felt off. There was a cop car parked smack in the middle of the road with its lights flashing but no officer in sight. The station and the attached McDonald's looked open, so I went up to pay with my credit card. Suddenly a man started walking towards me holding an umbrella, even though the place was covered by a low canopy. It was misting slightly, but I wasn't interested, and he asked if I wanted to borrow the umbrella. I said no, and he began walking faster. Then he said, "It works, the card works." I could feel my skin crawl. Something about the whole situation screamed run, and I began backing away. Turns out both the McDonald's and gas station were closed. That night we didn't get any gas and just got the hell out of there. Those two moments stick with me. There's something about late night gas stations, the kind of people you don't want to meet. My brother and I were in southwest Detroit, in a neighborhood we didn't really know. I had just come into some money, and we needed to grab some Swishers, so we'd figured we'd hit the nearest gas station. I had a pocket full of cash. My brother was wearing a bright red shirt. Yeah, not the smartest combo for the area, but we weren't thinking like that at the time. We walk into the gas station and everything seems normal. I head to the counter, grab what we need, and pull out a $100 bill. While I'm waiting for my change, two guys walk in. Nothing about them stands out at first. We don't really pay them much attention. Then I feel someone bump from behind. Guy one leans in and says, "You're out here grinding?" I'm caught off guard. I look at him as I hand the 100 to the cashier. "Nah man, ain't nothing like that." Kinda keep my voice calm while stuffing my change in my pocket. We all just want to get the hell out, so we turn to leave. But as we're walking out, one of them shoves my brother hard and reaches under his shirt. "Hey, get that red shirt one head out over here." And everything stopped. My heart dropped straight to my stomach and we both froze. "Yo, chill bro," we said, hands raised slightly. "We ain't on nothing, we're just students, man." For a few long seconds, no one moved. The guy then relaxed slightly, gave a half smirk and said, "Yeah, whatever. You need to take that damn red off." And just like that, they walked out. We stood there in shock for a moment and peeked out the glass door just in time to see 2 large blue SUVs pull up. They got in and rolled on like nothing happened. But we both knew one thing. If those dudes had decided to go left instead of right, we were done. No way we were making it out of that situation if it escalated. To this day, I don't flash cash in unfamiliar places, and my brother doesn't wear red anywhere near southwest Detroit. I live in India, and this happened a few years ago while I was out with my friends. It was just a regular evening. We were driving around the outskirts of the city, laughing, cracking jokes, and blasting music. One of my friends was at the wheel, and we all felt light and carefree. Until suddenly the car jolted to a stop, with no warning. There were groans and complaints coming from the car. It was like I'd broken hard, and everyone lurched forward. "What happened? You crazy, bro?" someone shouted. We turned to our friend in the driver's seat, but he didn't say a word. His eyes were locked on something outside. "Look at that." At first, I didn't get it. There were just trees lining the road. But then I saw it. Hanging from the thick, twisted branch of a massive banyan tree was a body. Not swinging, just hanging there. We got out the car slowly. I think part of me hoped it wouldn't be real, that it was some prank or an illusion from the headlights, but no, it was real. There was a boy of 17, wearing a blue shirt, black shorts, and glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose. His curly hair was matted with sweat, and his slippers lay neatly on the ground below him, like he'd taken them off just before climbing. The rope was tight around his neck. His face had turned a deep shade of purple, his eyes open, just staring. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own breath. My throat was dry, I couldn't speak, and I stood there frozen, eyes locked on his lifeless form. 2 of my friends pulled me away after a minute or 2, and we called the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned us briefly, took our statements, and told us we could go. I couldn't shake the image for days. The blue shirt, the empty sandals. And a few days later, we saw the local newspaper report. The boy had been preparing for an exam, a notoriously tough engineering entrance test in India known as JEE, but he hadn't been able to clear it. Pressure, expectations, and who knows what else pushed him over the edge. He was an only child, and now every time I drive past that part of the city, especially near that tree, I look away. I don't know if it's just guilt or paranoia, but sometimes I feel like his eyes are still watching me. Back in college, I used to make the same 5-hour drive home to my parents' house once or twice a month. Same route, same stops. Every time I'd fill up at this one BP station right off the interstate. It was kind of isolated, surrounded by woods on one side and empty lots on the other. But I always felt safe there. It was familiar. The night before one of those trips, I had a dream. A very specific dream. In it, my partner and I were on our way home. We pulled into the same BP gas station. My partner got out to go inside and pay for gas. I stayed in the car, feet up on the dash, scrolling on my phone. And everything felt normal until another car pulled up. It was an older model sedan. Inside were 4 Hispanic men talking loudly. I couldn't make out everything, but I could tell they were arguing about something drug-related. And at some point they noticed me in the car. One of them walked slowly around the front of my car, pulled out a gun, and shot me in the head. I woke up instantly, heart pounding. That vivid, heavy feeling stuck with me all morning. Later that day, we hit the road as planned. About halfway through the drive, we came around the bend where the BP station sits, the one where I always stopped at. And I saw it. The exact same car from my dream was sitting in the lot. 4 Hispanic men were standing around it talking, and one of them was holding a gun. We didn't stop. I told my partner to keep driving, and we found another gas station a few exits down. I never stopped at that BP ever. I don't know what would have happened if we'd have pulled up like we always did. Maybe nothing, maybe everything, but that dream felt like a warning. So I listened. Traffic jams suck. I was driving home one night, it must have been 11 p.m, on a long stretch of highway, when the few cars that there were on the road started to get closer together, and I knew something had happened up ahead. Eventually all the cars came to a complete standstill, and I could see something on the middle of the road. There was a semi that was blocking all lanes, engulfed in flames. Every car was a good way back. I wasn't close enough to see any fine details, but I could see the smoke and the fire and the heat waves. It was really unsettling. The police weren't even there yet. I need a leak. I realize I'm going to be here for at least another half an hour minimum. The debris was everywhere. I don't know what this semi was carrying, but it was littered all over the ground. I looked towards the vegetation at the end of the road and realized that I probably have a chance, and know that I probably have a chance to go piss now. Better get it over with quickly. As I said, it was really late. There were lights on the highway, so I could see my way into the trees just fine. And so I turn off my vehicle, make my way out, and start heading towards the trees. I hear the crunch of the leaves and grass under my feet with every stride I take. I get a comfortable way in. I know people can still probably see the back of me, but for common decency, I didn't want them to see much more. I finish up and start to turn around, when I see someone approaching me. They're making a beeline for me. I don't really have a chance to say anything before this guy is up in my face, and before I can get a word out, he punches me square in the jaw. The punch hit me so hard I fell backwards into a tree, right on my ass. That really hurt. It took me a few moments to stand up, dazed, and I looked forwards and the guy had already started walking off. I was livid. I wanted to do something bad to that guy. Why the hell did I just receive this, an unprovoked attack? I have no idea. That's when I see him get in the car directly behind me. I then look at the car and think for a moment. The thing is, when I'd left work, late, there was a car ages away who was going significantly slower than the speed limit. So, when it was safe, I overtook him and didn't think much of it. His car didn't have the speed capacity mine did, and it's not a big deal. You just overtake someone on the road and keep going. It's everyone's business. I think this guy must have had road rage, and when he slowed down, he took the opportunity to give me what for overtaking him. It's the only logical conclusion I can come to as to why anyone would possibly do that. I thought it through in my head, thought about telling the police seeing as they were going to be here anyway, but then decided against it. The punch really hurt, but I don't think it left any substantial or lasting damage. I waited a little while, made my way back to my car, and sat in the driver's seat waiting for the debris to clear. Once the police opened up a lane and everyone started leaving, the guy started tailing me. What the hell, dude? We weren't going very fast at first, but when I finally managed to get some speed, I outsped him and zoomed past the other cars. There's just no way he could catch up with me. When it came to my exit, I was afraid there'd be some way he'd follow me. So I turned into a gas station and parked my car next to the restrooms, where you can't actually see it from the main road. I exited the vehicle and looked out for a few minutes to see if he might come down the ramp and go to the gas station like I'd done. I waited about 10 minutes, and when he didn't, I finally drove home. It was certainly one of the most unexpected and horrible things to happen to me that night. 0 out of 10 wouldn't recommend. Maybe the moral of the story is stay in your car if something like this happens. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you did enjoy tonight's collection of On the Road and Gas Station stories. If of course you did, you can let me know down below. So that's it for this week. All the new content you're getting, and tomorrow I'm going to hit you up with a comp. I am planning to have visuals all the way through it, just so that you're aware, in the hopes of doing something a little bit different. I don't think I'm going to keep it to 3 hours either. I'm going to experiment with times because it looks like the 3-hour videos are starting to drop in popularity. So I'm going to be shaking things up, just so that you know for tomorrow if you do watch the comps. But that's it from me. I'd like to give a final thank you to my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. And if you would like some extra free stuff, it's free week over on Patreon, as I said at the start. Link in the description. It'd be the greatest time to go listen to those Ghost Town. Yeah, those stories were great. Seriously, check them out. I'm going to sign off though, guys. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Good night.